Hi, this is Eternal King bringing you another discussion video today. Also just today, I released a 20-minute clip of LOR gameplay, me playing some of the top decks in the format, winning all three games. So if you're interested in just pure gameplay, go watch that video. It's literally 20 minutes of me just mopping the floor with people on Eternal with the top decks. But with this discussion video, I wanted to talk a little bit about deck building advice. So one of the biggest ways that I find I'm different from other deck builders in the Eternal format, and that makes me one of the most competitive players in the format, is I have a slightly diverging opinion when it comes to deck ratioing. So for standard players, top competitive standard players, they all believe that loose ratioing for a deck is correct. I strongly differ on in that regard. I believe that the more competitive the archetype, the firmer the ratioing gets to be. And in fact, diluting the ratioing makes it worse. So I'll give you an example of an archetype that is not very good, but is still playable, and that is Poro King, right? So Poro King is an archetype that survives by the strength of its loose ratioing. It is the fact that you are playing one of every single kind of Poro that the game has available. And I run one of every single kind of Poro from the 1 to 2 mana slot. It's the loose ratioing that in fact empowers this weak archetype to be playable. There is not a single card here where I'm like, oh, I really want 3 Patch Porobots. Like, yeah, maybe there's a scenario where Patch Porobot roll some really good keywords on curve, but like for the most part, you don't really need 3 Patch Porobots. You don't need 3 Sinister Poros. You don't need 3 Prototype Poros. Like none of these Poros are good cards, but through the power of loose ratioing, you can in fact make them playable. And that's my general thought process when it comes to Eternal LOR, that the weaker the archetype, the looser the ratioing needs to be. And then by contrast, the stronger the archetype, the firmer the ratioing should be. So when I say loose and firm ratioing, I'm talking about 3-ofs versus 1-ofs, right? So a weak deck runs a lot of 1-offs, and that empowers weak archetypes to be more competitive in the Eternal format. And then if you're playing a competitive deck, a strong archetype, you should be playing those ratios as firm as humanly possible. So like Sparring Student should never be less than a 3-of. Emperor's Dais should never be less than a 3-of. Emperor's Army should never be less than a 3-of. Ribbon Dancer should never be less than a 3-of. Like I can just keep going through this entire list and be like, why these should not be less than 3-ofs. But you generally should not do so ever. Domination, Desert's Wrath, etc. Like just the way that this deck functions, it's so good at what it does that running things that aren't what it does is actually counterproductive to the power level of the deck. Loosening up the ratio to include more tech cards and more one-offs and more, surprise, I've got a deny in there. Like stuff like that, just don't do it. It's bad. It's actually counterproductive for the win rate of the deck. And it's one of the reasons why my Azir Aurelia list is so much more powerful than all of the other Azir Aurelia lists. Because when I saw Emperor's Army, I'm like, I'm just going to double down on what this deck does well. I don't need to run anything else other than what Azir Aurelia does well. Very few burst tricks. 2 twins, 2 shape stones, all I need to get the job done. Everything else is just pure Azir Aurelia good stuff. And then if the opponent tries to play anything big, it's getting Defiant Danced. If they play something with a Lifesteal, it's getting Defiant Danced. If they put a weapon onto an Auction, it's getting Defiant Danced. If Eddy plays a 6-mana card, it's getting Defiant Danced. That's why there's 3 of them, right? So like the firmer the ratioing, the stronger the deck. Specifically, I think the archetype is strong. So Rise is a great example of a deck that I believe was really bad. So Rise was a really bad deck for the history of this archetype. It won about 45% of games, and now, only now, do I believe that it has transcended from a weak archetype to a strong archetype, and it necessitates firmer ratioing. Things like I don't run any 1-offs. Entreat is a 2-off, you need the 2 for Rise. Eye of the Dragon, you only need 2 of them because, again, too many creatures is useless in a Rise deck. 2 Claws, 2 Autopuses, and everything else is just, you know, consistent value in a Rise shell. Steel Tempest for the stun, Time Trick to dig for landmarks, Steel Gale being the new stun card, 2 Denies, because again, you just want to protect your Rise, 3 Homecomings is your bounce, 3 Ritual Renewals. This card was buffed. It is essentially the same as a Targon staple card now, right? So Targon's card is 2 mana, heal 2, draw 1. Ritual Renewal is 4 mana, heal 4, draw 1. I view it as much the same in a Rise shell, where you have a lot of excess mana thanks to the mana landmark. I'm more than happy to run Ritual Renewal. I think this card is competitive in a deck like Rise where you just need the stall. You're just stalling and stalling and stalling. Will of Ionia as a 3 of, Deep Meditation as a 3 of, and then Rejuvenating Breeze as a 3 of. The reason why I'm running Rejuvenating Breeze is because it basically does the exact same thing Deep Meditation does, where you draw 2 spells, and again, Rejuvenating Breeze draws 2 spells. So what you're trying to do is tutor out Rise's Delve into the Past, right? He's shuffling in Delve into the Pasts, and if you want to draw cards, you want to be drawing spells. Drawing something that is non-spell related is bad. You don't want to be doing that, right? You 100% of the time want to be drawing spells because it reduces the card pool of your deck and increases the chance that you're drawing a Delve into the Past. So both of our draw cards, Deep Meditation and Rejuvenating Breeze, only draw spells. I've tried everything else. I've tried every other version of card draw in a Rise shell. It is more consistent just to draw spells when you're playing a Rise deck. And the extra healing, just sure, that's it. More healing, more stall. And then, of course, Unworthy Soul being the core bounce card of a Rise shell. So that's the thing, is like, as new cards get released that are powerful for certain archetypes, an example being Steel Gale, it allows you to firm up the ratioing on a deck and make it more competitive. And it's only decks that are not competitive that should remain loose ratioing in the Eternal format. There's very few cases where I can think of decks benefiting from loose ratioing unless they are weak. The weaker the archetype, the looser the ratioing. That is the golden rule. If you're playing a meme deck that is not very good, like, you know, for example, Lurk. I run Lurk very solid, right? Lurk is a well-established archetype that basically does what it does. It's basically firm ratioing across the board. Like, why am I running a one-off of anything else other than just, you know, turn 1 Lurk advantage stuff into a big rally into the Eddy deck, and then you swing with all the damage. Like, why am I doing anything else? In fact, I actually believe that dropping Jawfish is correct, and I might do that right now. And I don't know, run something else. Not this, that's for sure. Doombreaker's bad, but just run something else. Anything else, really? Spells here, yeah. I don't know, just like that. I would probably just run this, and because I find Jawfish never lands, so probably just that. And like, that's firming up the deck even more. And so some of it's like going through again and being like, I kept the Jawfishes in there because most Lurk decks run Jawfish, but I've like never once dropped Jawfish efficiently in a Lurk deck for 8 mana. So again, firming up the ratioing again. It is a very straightforward process. It is a very straightforward process when it comes to taking what it should be one of the best Eternal decks in the game and making it one of the best Eternal decks in the game. If it's already a strong archetype that is predetermined to do well, you should only have to run the cards that are good in that deck in a firm ratio. Forge Chief is a 3 of in Jace Lux, right? Prototype Porobot is like the best card in Jace Lux, even better than Pharaoh's Financier in my opinion. Instant 3 of. All the 6 mana cards, like, yes, we run 3 Hex Obliterators because we have to kill big stuff in the Jace Lux shell. We don't want them going like over our heads with bigger stuff. You have to run the 3 Shock Blasts because you need the burn. You need the formulas for the draw. You need the assembly line for the chumpers. Like, nothing in this deck needs to be ratioed down. Because it's a good deck. It is a top meta competitive deck. I believe Rise has now transcended to being a fairly competitive shell. Thanks to its new stun card essentially being an auto 3 include and allowing you to take out a lot of the memey stuff that was required to make the deck playable before. You firm up the ratioing, you make the deck more competitive, you run what's good in it, you cut what's not good in it. It goes from 45% win rate to, 55% win rate. That's how it goes. And a lot of people get this as well. Like, I'll see it with a lot of other deck builders. Not all of them, but, you know, stuff like this, right? Lulu, Jinx, Flame Chompers, you know, plus Boom Baboon for Flame Chompers. Like, that's a very firm ratioing call. But yeah, it doesn't apply to everything. Like, there are certain decks that, like, I just can't make work because I'm not a great loose ratioing deck builder. A good example is Lilia. Recently I've been trying to make Lilia work because I saw someone on ladder playing Lilia, and it was like a bounce spam Lilia shell, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Leveling Lilia just by spamming retreats, blooming buds, even sprite dance I think is good in that kind of shell. But the reality is that, like, if you run the firm ratioing in this Lilia shell, it's too weak. You can run Vestayan Disciple, Mr. Root, Petal Pixie, Retreat, Dewdrop Harvest, Blooming Bud, Lilia, Sprite Dance, Sprite Mother, Aberrant Mage Seeker, Sign-In, Tree Sprites, and then the 8 mana card. Like, you can run all these cards that you think might be good in the deck in firm ratioing, and it just won't be powerful enough. So that's when loose ratioing is actually, you know, better, right? So you can drop those two down pretty easily, and then you could, I don't know, run something weird, essentially, right? Like jam in like a Mina. You're going to jam Mina, and then, you know, after you've done all your board spammy stuff that leveled Lilia but didn't really do anything, you can play Mina and hopefully swing for lethal or something. Or, you know, you could run 2 Minas, and then look at your spells, and then, like, maybe you're like, oh, I'm gonna jam 2 Singular Wills, you know. I'm gonna jam some Singular Wills in there to remove bounce their entire board back to their hand or something. Which of course would also bounce your entire board back to your hand, which wouldn't be ideal for a deck like this. But you understand my point, where it's like, the weaker the deck, the looser the ratioing has to be, and the more out of the box kind of cards need to be included to make the deck function in a, you know, reliable fashion, or even in an unreliable fashion. Just make the deck function at all. You need to loosen up the ratioing. It could be like 1 Sign-In, 2 of these, 3 Minas or something, because you just, like, really want to, like, bounce the opponent's board back to their hand so you can actually swing for damage at some point. I don't know. Of course, I don't think this deck wins at all. Honestly, like, I've been struggling so much with Lilia. I've tried Lilia Undir, and I'm like, I'd rather be on Vlad Undir. Vlad Undir is a much better deck than Lilia Undir. I've tried, you know, Lilia Lux. I've dropped the Lux in the Lilia deck. I think you just run Lilia now. Because, again, Lilia's just kind of doing her own thing where she bounces summon effects. So, like, it's tough. It's tough. The weaker the archetype, the more out of the box your ratioing has to be in terms of how you build a deck, right? It's just like weird stuff that you would not expect to see in a Lilia shell. So this is Eternal King signing out. It's just a little discussion about deck building. But that is my rule of thumb overall. It's just like, looser ratioing is better for bad archetypes, and firmer ratioing is better for strong archetypes. And as new sets get released and as new cards get released, even bad archetypes can transcend to good archetypes and therefore necessitate firmer ratioing. And I believe Rise is one of those decks. I believe my firm ratioed Rise is nuts, like insanely consistent. This is Eternal King, signing out.